Today's story is Benny's Giggle Quest. Chapter 1. The Magical Carrot. In a snug little burrow nestled beneath a sprawling oak tree, there lived a rabbit named Benny. Benny was not just any rabbit. He was a curious little fellow with big, floppy ears and a twitchy nose that was always on the lookout for something exciting. His fur was as soft as a cloud, and he had a knack for getting into the most peculiar situations. One sunny afternoon, while bouncing around the garden, Benny stumbled upon an odd-looking carrot sticking out of the ground. But this was no ordinary carrot. It shimmered like gold and sparkled under the sun, creating a rainbow of colors that danced in Benny's eyes. "Wow! I've never seen a carrot like that before," he exclaimed, his voice bubbling with excitement. Benny approached the carrot cautiously, his nose quivering with curiosity. As he reached out to touch it, the carrot began to tremble and vibrate. "What on earth?" Benny gasped, stepping back. Suddenly, with a poof and a pop, the carrot opened up like a door, revealing a swirling, colorful portal. "Hey you! Yes, you with the floppy ears. Are you coming in or what?" A squeaky voice called from the portal. Benny peered inside and saw a little creature that looked like a mix between a squirrel and a dragon, with sparkly scales and a bushy tail. It waved its tiny paws excitedly. Without a second thought, Benny hopped right into the portal. As soon as he crossed the threshold, he felt a tingling sensation all over. "Here we go," he shouted, more excited than scared. When the swirling stopped, Benny found himself in a world unlike any he had ever seen. The sky was a vibrant shade of purple, and the clouds were made of candy floss. Trees had trunks that looked like giant lollipops, and flowers sang cheerful tunes as they swayed in the breeze. Benny couldn't believe his eyes. "This is amazing," he cheered. Chapter 2. The Land of Silly Sounds. As Benny hopped around, he noticed that the ground felt bouncy, like a giant trampoline. With each jump he soared higher and higher. "Whee!" he squealed, doing flips in the air. But as he landed, he noticed something peculiar. He was not alone. There were creatures everywhere, each making the silliest sounds Benny had ever heard. One creature, a fluffy blue thing with googly eyes, was bouncing on a pogo stick and making a sound like a honking goose. Another creature, a plump purple one with a tiny hat, was rolling around in the grass, giggling and squealing like a balloon losing air. "Welcome to the land of silly sounds," the pogo stick creature announced, bouncing over to Benny. "I'm Zippy, and you're just in time for our annual Giggle Festival." "Giggle Festival?" Benny echoed, his ears perking up. "What's that?" "It's when all the creatures in this land gather to make the silliest sounds ever. We compete to see who can make the funniest noise," Zippy explained, his eyes twinkling with excitement. "You should join us." Benny's heart raced with excitement. "I'm in," he declared. "But how do I make a silly sound?" "Just be yourself. Everyone has a funny sound hidden inside," Zippy replied, bouncing away. Benny thought hard. He could make all sorts of noises with his mouth. He practiced a few: a loud boing, a squeaky squeak, and a wobbly wobble. Before he knew it, Benny was surrounded by all sorts of creatures making their own silly sounds. Gurgles, honks, and even a noise that sounded like a frog trying to sing opera. Benny took a deep breath and let out a sound that was part ribbit, part giggle. The creatures erupted in laughter. "That's it, Benny," they cheered, clapping their paws. "You're a natural." Chapter 3. The Great Sound-Off. As the festival began, creatures gathered in a large circle, each taking turns to show off their best silly sound. Zippy went first, making a loud honking noise that echoed through the air. The crowd roared with laughter. Next, it was Benny's turn. His heart raced, but he remembered everyone's encouraging cheers. Channeling his inner goofiness, he bounced into the center of the circle. "Here goes nothing," he shouted, and with all his might, he let out the wobbly ribbit giggle sound. The crowd paused for a moment, and then burst into fits of laughter. "Benny, you're hilarious," a creature shouted, wiping a tear from its eye. Benny beamed with pride. One by one, the creatures took their turns, each sillier than the last. There was a creature who could sound like a rubber ducky, another who made a noise like a kazoo stuck in a blender, and even a tiny one who squeaked like a mouse stepping on a bubble wrap. But then, a grumpy-looking creature with a frown marched up to the stage. It was a pink, fluffy thing with a very serious expression. "I am Grumblewump, and I shall show you the silliest sound," it declared. With that, Grumblewump opened its mouth wide and let out a sound that was, strangely enough, just a deep, grumpy growl. The crowd gasped, and then there was silence. Benny's heart sank. Was this how the festival would end? "Wait!" Benny shouted. "I think I know what to do." In a flash, he hopped up next to Grumblewump. "Why don't we team up? You can be grumpy, and I'll be silly." Grumblewump looked confused, but after a moment, it nodded. Benny took a deep breath, and together they created the most absurd sound ever heard in the land of silly sounds, a mix of a loud growl and Benny's ribbit giggle. The crowd erupted into laughter, rolling on the ground with joy. Grumblewump's frown turned upside down into the biggest grin. "That was actually fun," it chuckled. Chapter 4. The Quest for the Lost Giggle. As the Giggle Festival continued, Benny and his new friends celebrated with games, food, and lots of silly sounds. But just as they were about to partake in the grand Giggle Pie eating contest, a sudden hush fell over the crowd. A tiny creature with sparkling wings flitted excitedly to the center. "Attention, everyone! It appears that the Great Giggle of the land has gone missing," it announced, its wings fluttering anxiously. "Without it, the Giggle Festival cannot continue." The creatures gasped. "What do we do?" Zippy asked, looking worried. Benny, always the curious rabbit, felt a surge of determination. "We can find it. I'm sure it's just lost somewhere in this silly world," he declared. "Great idea, Benny," Zippy cheered, and soon everyone rallied together. "Let's find the Great Giggle," they all chorused. The tiny winged creature flapped closer. "I heard it was last seen near the Wobble Forest, where the trees bounce and giggle," it said. "Let's go," Benny shouted. With that, the group set off, hopping and bouncing through the colorful landscape, eager to solve the mystery. As they arrived at the Wobble Forest, they found the trees bouncing joyfully to and fro, making silly noises that sounded like a mix of giggles and whoopee cushions. "Hello, trees," Benny called. "Have you seen the Great Giggle?" One tree leaned down, its branches shaking. "Oh yes. It was here, bouncing with us, but then it giggled too hard and bounced away." "Which way did it go?" Benny asked, his eyes wide with excitement. "Towards the slippery slope," the tree replied, pointing with a wiggly branch. Chapter 5. The Slippery Slope Adventure. The slippery slope was just as silly as its name suggested. It was a hill covered in bright green mud that looked like jelly. As Benny and his friends carefully approached, they all slipped and slid around, laughing as they tried to keep their balance. "Hey, who wants to race?" Zippy challenged, bouncing up to the top of the slope. Benny couldn't resist. "I'm in." With a loud whoosh, they took off, sliding down the slope, giggling uncontrollably. Benny bumped into Grumblewump, who was trying to keep its serious face but ended up slipping and falling right into a puddle of jelly. "Grumblewump," Benny laughed. "You look like a sweet treat." With determination, they continued their search, sliding and slipping, until they reached the bottom of the slope. There, they found something shiny bobbing in a puddle. "Look," Benny cried, pointing. "What's that?" As they approached, they realized it was the Great Giggle. It was a glowing, bouncy orb that shimmered with every sound the creatures had made. Benny reached out, and with a gentle touch, the Great Giggle burst into a rainbow of laughter that filled the air. All at once, the sounds of silliness returned. Trees giggled, flowers sang, and every creature joined in with their own silly noises. Benny and his friends danced around, celebrating their victory. The Giggle Festival was back on. Chapter 6. A wonderful ending. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the creatures gathered for one final celebration. Benny, now a hero among his new friends, stood proudly on a makeshift stage made of lollipop sticks. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this silly adventure," Benny said, his voice full of joy. "I've learned that laughter and friendship can make anything possible." The crowd cheered, and as they all joined together for a final round of silly sounds, Benny felt a warmth in his heart. Each creature made a funny noise, creating a symphony of giggles and chuckles that echoed through the land. As the stars twinkled above, Benny realized it was time for him to return home. "I'll never forget this fantastic adventure," he called out to his friends. The little winged creature appeared again, ready to guide him back through the portal. With one last goodbye, Benny hopped into the glowing portal that awaited him. As he tumbled back into his own world, he felt a spark of magic still lingering in the air. Benny landed back in his cozy burrow beneath the oak tree. He looked around, still smiling at the memories of the day. "What a wild adventure," he whispered to himself, snuggling into his soft bed of leaves. As he drifted off to sleep, Benny dreamed of the land of silly sounds, where laughter echoed and friendships bloomed like the brightest flowers. He knew that no matter where he went, the magic of laughter would always be with him, ready to spark new adventures whenever he wished. And so, with a soft sigh of happiness, Benny the curious rabbit closed his eyes, ready for whatever silly surprises awaited him in his dreams.